I do want to move on a little bit to the Brewers for a second because the Brewers, it's a little bit more tepid waters when we talk about trades. They still got a few good trades in there. It wasn't maybe as, as big as, say, the Blue Jays or the Padres or the Twins, who did a million different things. But let's talk about the Brewers for a sec.
Yeah, no, we didn't really anticipate that the Brewers were going to do a ton. They were rumored in something, Eugenio Suarez was a big rumor for them, and then obviously the Mariners jumped the market for him last night. So it is what it is. We knew that the Brewers were pretty comfortable with their group, mostly because this isn't an all-in year for them like it is for the Padres, or it should have been for the Cubs, which we'll talk about shortly. But again, the Brewers are a really smart organization. They make the moves that they need to and that fit their evaluations, and that's what they do. Shelby Miller is, a solid enough pickup. Obviously, he's not going to turn the bullpen around. He's not going to, or not that it needs to be turned around, but he's not going to, transform it into this baseball leading group. Obviously they got Jordan Montgomery as sort of a salary dump part of that trade. But Danny Jansen's a fine catcher to bring onto the roster. I think, it'll be nice to have his bat around on the bench. Brandon Lockridge, is not, a world beater of an outfielder. He's really just depth for a team that's, sort of dealt with some injuries in the outfield this year. But you move off Nestor Cortez's deal, which clearly, the Brewers didn't really think they were going to get much return on value for that. So again, it's one of those deadlines where it's like there's not much to talk about, but because there didn't need to be much to talk about, they're leading the Cubs in the NL Central right now. They're on pace maybe to have the best record in baseball. If you don't think that, like, oh my God, this is our only year to do this, there's no reason to sell the farm and really commit all the way in. And I think the Brewers handled the deadline about as reasonably as they should have.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that there's plenty of teams, and again, we'll get to two that probably made a few mistakes here or there when it came to this trade deadline. But as for the Brewers, yeah, they played it probably as best they could have. Because, like you said, there's no, it goes to the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The
Mm.
Brewers are doing very well right now, and it's kind of saying, out with the old and with the new, especially with a starting pitcher like Shelby Miller and, getting an extra catcher like Danny Jansen. Having, defense like that, going up like with teams like the Cubs, not that the Cubs have been amazing, but this season they're doing very well. I think was a great choice for them. And yeah, you get a few other players sprinkled in between like Montgomery and you get Lockridge. Those aren't the shining stars really in these trades. But again, I think like you said, there's not a huge amount to talk about with the Brewers. They played it safe, but they played it the right amount of safe to get people who will pay off in a, but not in the sense of being a prospect. They're not all-star players, but they're not like the worst player in the world. They're average.
Yeah, no, and I really don't want to undersell the addition of Jansen. Obviously, William Contreras is the starter at catcher. He's an all-star catcher. Obviously, he hasn't had his best season this year, but he's excellent, usually, and as you can normally expect from a franchise catcher. But it's really nice to, Danny Jansen's hit 11 home runs this year. He's got a 700 OPS at the time of the trade. He's a good defensive catcher. I mean, this is a really nice move. Obviously, ideally, it wouldn't have been like the headlining move for the Brewers at the deadline, but insofar as they were going to play this really safe and they were going to let the market come to them, which this was a very sellers heavy market, which we saw with some of the prices that were being. I mean, the Padres gave up just an enormous amount of talent for I mean, they got great players, but it was just they gutted their farm system. The Brewers were never in position to do that. That's just not how they run their organization. So I really like Danny Jansen as a player. I do think he fits, what the Brewers needed in a backup catcher. Again, good right-handed power bat, and it'll allow William Contreras to play some more DH and maybe save his legs for the playoffs, which is nice. But ultimately, again, this is just a good team doing what it needs to stay good and not trying to push all its chips into the table.